Good evening. Welcome to the 7:30 regular meeting of Lynchburg City Council. I'm Bo Wright, sitting in for Mayor Mary Jane Dolan, who's unable to be here. Please stand for the invocation by Councilmember Wilder, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the Lynchburg City Council and the work we're doing in our community. Give us guidance and wisdom as we lead this organization. Bless our staff members, our police force, our firefighters, our first responders. Bless our citizens and workers for our city that work hard to make sure this is a great place to live and play. Continue to give us safety in our cities, Lord. We come against city attacks from violence, and we pray peace in our city and love and unity amongst each other. Pray for all of us as we continue to make this a great place. In your precious name we pray, amen.
Allegiance to
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. We have several recognitions this evening, and the first is with the American Red Cross. It's in a recognition of Mr. Ashton Allen. I'm going to call on Avery Watkins to come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council. Thank you for providing us the opportunity to acknowledge Ashton Allen and her heroic efforts. My name is Avery Watkins, and I serve as the Athletics and Aquatic Supervisor under the leadership and guidance of Maggie Mace, the Recreation Services Manager, Jenny Jones, the Director of Parks and Recreation. I'm accompanied by my Assistant Supervisor, Joanna Nisbet, and Bill Brent, the Executive Director of the Central Virginia Chapter, American Red Cross. Ashton Allen received her American Red Cross Lifeguard Certificate in May of 2022 after 4 days of intense training at our own Miller Park pool. Ashton was a standout in the class. She continuously motivated her peers and classmates, volunteered to demonstrate drills, and did not hesitate to help others who were struggling. She passed the final exam with flying colors. A Liberty University student and a big sister to Tatum Allen, who also guards the Miller Park pool, Ashton is no stranger to leadership, service, and jumping into action. On June 18, 2022, Ashton's training and preparation was put to the test as she successfully rescued and performed CPR to save a young swimmer at Miller Park pool. Her quick action and ability to remain calm under pressure ultimately saved this individual's life. I take it as an honor to have been able to train and supervise Ashton. I'd now like to turn the microphone over to Bill Brent with the Red Cross.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you. I guess I need to stay facing this way so everyone can hear me. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's a special pleasure to be here this evening. As I shared with a few, Lynchburg is part of my hometown experience. I was born just up the road, and my grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts and uncles lived on Brook Street. So I have fond childhood memories of great days at Miller Park. So to be here, to be able to represent the American Red Cross this evening, to present this award is an honor and a privilege and a homecoming of sorts, so thank you. For this act, and I'm gonna just pick up where you left off, Avery. For this act, Ashton Allen has been awarded the American Red Cross Life-Saving Award for Professional Responders. This is the highest award given by the American Red Cross to an individual or team of individuals who sustains a life by using the skills and knowledge learned in an American Red Cross Training Services course. This certificate bears the signature of the President and CEO of the American Red Cross and the signature of the Chairman of the American Red Cross. This action exemplifies the highest degree of concern for one human being for another who is in distress. And with that, Ashley, we have the certificate for your selfless and humane action using life-saving skills issued by the American Red Cross headquarters in Washington, D.C., signed by President and CEO Gail McGovern and our chairman, Bonnie McElveen Hunter, American Red Cross. Congratulations. Surprises in the room, right? So, before you go away, Avery and Joanna, congratulations. We are pleased to notify you that one of your students has achieved or saved a life and is receiving an award. We wanted to be sure to also honor you for teaching these life-saving skills. The Life-Saving Instructor Award was crafted in 2020 and is now part of the National Life-Saving Awards Award given to instructors who teach award recipients of either the Certificate of Merit or the Life-Saving Award Professional Responder. No nomination is needed to receive this award because we're just so proud that you were able to do what you did. And as a past lifeguard trained by an instructor like you, thank you for that too. So to each of you, Adrian, here, I'm going to leave that piece there. And
One more photo. Thank you.
Okay, can y'all hear me okay? Yes. All right, we have another recognition this evening. It is the International Economic Development Council Gold Award. It looks very sharp. And I'm going to read quickly what this is for. It's the Office of Economic Development and Tourism received the Gold Award for the 2021 annual report from the International Economic Development Council. These awards honor organizations across the country for exemplary economic development marketing campaigns, projects, and programs. The Gold Award is the highest honor in this category. So congratulations to the Economic Development team and tourism staff for this recognition. I want to recognize Margette Upshur, Anna Benson, and Emmeline Gwynn. Here's your award. Come on up, team. Oh, Emmeline, here you are. Okay, come on over here. Council?
That's great.
Amazing. Congratulations. Tonight's City Council agenda is divided into 3 sections: the consent agenda, public hearing, and public comment. The first section is the consent agenda. This section includes routine items, and all items may be approved by one vote. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Second.
Councilmember?
Just one quick question. Do we need to amend the agenda? Because I think we got the message that number 9 was going to be pulled.
I was going to move to that next, actually.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thank
so if you could please cast your votes on the consent agenda. Thank you. The motion passes 6-0. We are now into public hearings, and I believe to Councilmember Helgeson's point, there was a question about whether an item would remain on the agenda tonight. City Manager Benda.
Absolutely. So we received word through community development staff today that at number 9, consideration of adopting the resolution amending the land use and rezoning for Old Graves Mill Road, that the petitioner had asked that because of an illness and also just the complement of people on the dais, that there wasn't the full body, that they'd be continued from this evening.
Mr. City Attorney? Yes. Given that, do we need consent of council then to remove the item from the agenda or to continue it to a future meeting?
Yes, sir. The motion to be made would be to table it indefinitely at this point, and then later on, council could bring it up again.
Council, is there discussion or a motion? Councilmember Feraldi.
I would offer my objection to it. I do believe we have some residents here looking to speak towards this matter. And I think we've had ample opportunity for hearing from both the developer, the proposal from community development, and this evening is for the residents to offer their insights on the matter. And as I reminded council last meeting, I believe it's our duty to move forward with the business of the day. Simply having a council member not be present should not slow us down. And so in respecting that from last week, contrary to 2 meetings ago, I'd like us to move forward accordingly.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Well, just if the developer is asked to move it, I mean, shouldn't we move it? I mean, if he's, since it's in his favor for or against.
My understanding, City Manager, is that they requested because a member of their team who is going to present is ill. Is that
That's correct.
right?
I gave you the email that was sent to city staff. If you looked at it, it was an illness, and also that they just had said something about full complement. So I just wanted to make sure that I represented well why the request and what the requests were made from.
It's not action by council. It's the developers pulling it.
If I may, they're not pulling the project.
Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I do agree to be consistent with our recent practices that we should not pass over an item simply because a council member is not here. However, this is an issue that, from everything I've received, is somewhat debated and contentious, and for the petitioner not to have their spokesman here to respond to any critiques, criticism, or give insights, I think is not the proper way to make decisions on our city's business. So although I think there's merit to Councilmember Feraldi's proposal, I would be in favor of passing it over when we can have all the resources and voices in the room to address all the questions that council may have about the project.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I just quickly want to add, are you making that as a motion?
Yes, I would make that. If it's not on the table yet to do that, I would, with all due respect to the merits of Councilmember Feraldi's comments and observations.
Is there a second? Second. Councilmember Nelson, would you like to make additional comments?
I think I've probably addressed all the relevant issues enough. Thank you.
Councilmember Wilder? No. Okay, Councilmember Feraldi, I know you wanted to add something.
You know, candidly, I respect my colleagues' pursuit in this direction. Unfortunately, I arrive at a different conclusion. The developer has had at least 2, maybe 3 meetings with the Planning Commission. There was an opportunity for them to discuss it with us last meeting, and now we're delaying this because they can't be here because of the full complement of council and potentially because someone is sick. That is an unfortunate circumstance. However, in the correspondence we've all received, in the neighbors who I do see from that part of town who wish to speak to this, I think it's incumbent upon us to prioritize them in hearing from them, since we've had multiple opportunities to hear from one side of this issue, By delaying this, we would have to ask those same folks to try to come back to another public hearing, and then the developer would have another opportunity to present when they've had at least 3, 4, maybe 5 opportunities. And so with that, I would respectfully request that we at least hold the public hearing today, so that we can hear comment and then keep the public hearing open so that the folks who did come can offer their insights. But I will be voting against the motion, and do think we should resolve this today. My fear is that if we don't resolve it today, potentially we could be a council member short in December, and then this won't be resolved until January. And so with that, I'll be voting no, and that'd be my request.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Phelps? And followed by Councilmember Nelson.
You mentioned the developers here. So if they pulled it and then they're here, I think that means that they were ready to present. Are they not here?
As I understand,
Huh?
I understand the traffic engineer was the main presenter, and
Okay.
that's what's critical to the overall application. The developer is here, but the person that was critical for the presentation is not.
Yeah, and I guess, a couple things. One, I'll be voting against the motion to table indefinitely because we now have several neighbors that showed up. And if we have it tabled indefinitely, what that does is means that at any time, somebody could say, let's bring this up, and you bring it up and vote. And that is not fair because as neighbors showed up to speak to the issue, I think that's categorically unfair, where the ball is, the advertisements were made, says here's what's going to be on the agenda. The developer is here. With that, somebody, if they pull it, then it's up to them to have to come back at some other time. But if it's council to say we're going to amend the agenda and just delay it and table it indefinitely, I'm not for that. I mentioned, so.
Well, may I actually, that's a good point. I want to clarify with the city attorney. If we were to table it indefinitely, it would still have to be re-advertised as a public hearing. Is that correct? The whole process would still have to be followed. There would still be public notification. So it wouldn't be as though if we were to table it tonight in consultation with the petitioner, that it could be brought back willy-nilly. It would have to be advertised according to state code.
That's correct. And council could pose a question to planning staff if it would be feasible to have all of the advertisements and postings completed by December. Council does have the option of simply tabling it until a date certain, the December date.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. I also have a question to the city attorney as to whether or not we could bifurcate the public hearing and hear from those who have something to say and may not find convenience in coming back later. Certainly they can and might if we were to table it, but let them have their say at this time in this place, and we will just keep our notes on that.
Yes, sir, I think you could, but you just wouldn't close the public hearing. You would keep it open until the next meeting, which would be in December.
If that's the case and that's within our realm of authority, I would ask that I be allowed to amend my motion so as to have anyone who wants to speak at the hearing tonight voice their expressions, and then we will table it. And I think December 13th is probably a good specific date that everybody, all the resources can get back together.
Just so Councilmember Wilder, are you comfortable with that motion? Yes, sir. Okay. Councilmember Helgeson.
Just to be clear, I think you would withdraw your motion because your motion was to table indefinitely. So now what we do is proceed with the public hearing, and then at the end of the public hearing, we then table after we hear from the public, or we table action tonight, and then we'll take action at a later date. I think that would be
Is that the proper procedure?
No, sir. As I understand it, what you're requesting is not to close the public hearing.
Correct.
To keep it open, the matter would not be considered, the matter would not be tabled. It would just be that the matter remains open and is resumed in December.
Whatever is most efficient and effective, I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, because his motion was to table this before we debated.
Can you clarify what the proper motion would be in this moment?
It sounds like, as I understand it, Councilmember Nelson is seeking a friendly amendment among council to
Yes.
allow for the change of the motion to basically be to proceed with the public hearing and give the opportunity to keep it open December. The individual who is unable to be here this evening will then be able to be given the opportunity to make a presentation on behalf of the developer and the petitioner.
And not exclusively the petitioner. Anybody else who opposes it can come back and say something additional. So it,
Need only by consensus approve the motion that's been put on the record, if everyone is good with that.
Is there consensus?
If I may, is that feasible?
Yes, so in Little Rumblings, I think there were two questions as to whether or not we can meet publication, what have you, in advance of December 13th. Yes, and I, at least over my shoulder with the developer, I've got some nods that December 13th works for them. So instead of an indefinite continuance, it sounds like the 13th would work for publication and also the...
Council, I think we're showing favoritism to a developer rather than the voters and citizens who live in that precinct, in that area. And I think we've neglected them long enough. We should move forward with the business of the day and make a decision on it so they have peace of mind knowing that they don't have to think about this again in the future. It's quite disappointing that if we're going to delay this, we're just going to put off another month so that way one person on the development side can have their say when there's plenty of folks who express their opposition via email. There's plenty of folks who are here who want to speak to it. Let's get this done and let's move on with it. I don't think there's any need to delay this.
Thank you. In that instance, I will call for the vote on the motion, since we don't have consensus, and we'll proceed. So can you please cast your vote on the motion to open the public hearing and then continue it to the December 13th meeting? Okay?
and my understanding is that does not require another publication. Is that correct?
That's my understanding
Okay.
as well, Councilmember Nelson.
All right, thank you.
The notice will be satisfied.
Okay, very good. Please cast your votes. And the motion passes 4-2. Okay, so we'll move into public hearings. There's a procedure for public hearings.
But,
Yes.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I would submit that that was the motion to replace the original. Now, council would vote on the amended motion.
Oh, even though, I didn't, I thought it was a friendly amendment that Councilmember Wilder had accepted.
Yes, but it was not accepted by the entirety of council as a consensus. So council, would, at
very
this
good.
point, would
Okay.
need to move to vote to approve.
Thank you very much. Okay, please cast.
But if it was accepted by consensus, we
Well, it wasn't accepted by consensus.
yeah, so that's what we voted on.
I know, but I think this replaces that. So if we could, please cast your vote. And the motion passes 4-2.
Mr. Vice Mayor, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with those in the room that they're, what we just did, so that everyone's on the same page, that they can still speak to this tonight?
Yes, folks can still speak to this evening. We will have the it's item number 9 on the agenda. And so the public hearing will be open for community comment later this evening, once we reach it on the agenda. Thank you. Public hearings. This section includes all public hearings as required by law or as council may direct. The procedure is as follows. Staff will make a presentation. Comments will then be solicited from the public. An individual speaker shall have 3 minutes to speak. If the speaker represents a group, the speaker shall have 5 minutes. A speaker representing a group shall identify that group at the beginning of his or her remarks, and a group may have only one spokesperson. Each speaker shall clearly state his or her name and locality of residence. You'll see a green, yellow, red light there in front of you to indicate your time. Upon the conclusion of public comments, the public hearing will be closed and the matter referred to council for deliberation. We'll start with item number 6, consideration of adopting a resolution authorizing a supplemental lease agreement with the General Services Administration, GSA, TSA. Staff will provide a brief summary of the request, and that's Mr. Legala.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and members of council. The lease amendment before council has been presented as a business information briefing during your October 25th work session, and tonight we're asking council to authorize the Transportation Security Administrations to amend their existing lease agreement at the airport through a public hearing. As you recall, the TSA occupies office space in the airport's main terminal under an agreement that will expire in February of 23. And the federal government recently approached the airport administration in order to extend that term. The new amendment will allow TSA to continue leasing 1,303 square feet of office space in order to accommodate all administrative work related to passenger security screening operations at the airport, and has been structured as a 5-year agreement, followed by the option for an additional 5-year at the end of the initial term. The amendment will also incorporate new FAA mandated language throughout in order to bring it up to date. The lease was advertised on October 26th to solicit bids from interested parties. With no other bids having been received, staff is recommending that City Council accept the bid of the Government Services Administration for the amendment of the lease agreement. The Lynchburg Regional Airport Commission was briefed on the lease agreement throughout the process and has also recommended that City Council accept the GSA's bid. At the conclusion of the public hearing, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, I'll be brief in what I have to say. First, my name is Timothy Santiago. I live in the city of Lynchburg, full-time now, but with average inflation being approximately, if I'm not mistaken, 4% annual, I defer to the financial expert here to correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked at it and it's only annualized at a 3% increase on the amendment. If it goes longer, I feel like the city's being gypped, even just by a little bit. Why not amend it to where it stays with inflation and the city gets what the city deserves? It's not much that you would be asking of the TSA that has an astronomical budget. So why not amend it to just that little bit to where it stays to where our city gets what it deserves? With that being said, I yield back.
Anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Are there any emails or phone calls?
There are none.
Okay. The public hearing is closed and the matter rests with council. Discussion, comments? May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Councilmember Helgeson.
Nothing to add. He presented a good report. So,
Thank you.
And I do appreciate that. I mean, now inflation is about almost 9%, thanks to all the federal spending, but can you address that actually, Andrew? I know we have kind of contracts that are in there.
Actually,
Yeah.
so over the years with the CPI, you know, we do the CPI each year, and over the past 10 or 15 years, it's averaged anywhere between 1.7 and I think it was 2.3, and then somewhere near the 3 mark. That's pretty much what all our agreements are throughout the whole entire airport. We do keep everything roughly at around the 3% mark. And this way we keep everything consistent with our federal grant assurances with the FAA, because what we do with one tenant, we have to do with everybody else and all tenants throughout the airport. So to remain consistent with all lease agreements, we do everything very consistently, and we've determined that 3% is our average of all the years put together, and the GSA was agreeable to it. Yep.
Okay, please cast your votes. And the motion passes 6-0. Item number 7, consideration of adopting an ordinance approving the petition to rezone 1.29 acres located at 102 Gardens Way to allow for the construction of 6 townhomes with associated access and utilities. Staff will provide a brief summary of the request. Ms. Frischeisen.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of council. Candlewood LLC is petitioning to rezone 1 29/100 acres located at 102 Gardens Way from R1 Low Density Residential District to R4C High Density Residential District conditional. The rezoning would allow the construction of 6 townhomes with associated access and utilities. The city's future land use map recommends medium density residential use for the area. These areas include single family houses, duplexes, and townhomes up to 12 units per acre. Where infill can happen, it should match the existing neighborhoods. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this petition at their meeting on October 12th.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone to make a presentation?
My name is Jamie White with White Engineering Design, representing the petitioner. thank Ms. Fresheisen for her description of our project. A couple of things I want to bring up with this project. We're looking at the rezoning of an attachment of what was already a patio home development at the end of Candlewood Court. This was originally a part of that parcel. Originally, it was subdivided out because it was part of an R1 original zoning with the idea that we were going to take this to rezone this piece. We're coming off of Candlewood Court. That's where this development goes down to a dead end. Everything in that area is either a patio home or adjoining to it is an apartment complex. Back behind our development, there is one single-family home that is accessed off Beverly Hills Circle. That is the only single-family residence. It's right there in the general area that is accessible through this side of town. When you look at what's there in the surrounding areas, look at what the future land use map recommends, which is medium density, which is up to 12 units per acre. What we're asking for is 6 units, so that in essence, we're going to create the exact same patio homes that are already in the neighborhood out there as it is. Our access is only from Candlewood Court, so it will look and feel as a part of the existing development that is there. And what we're asking for is, in essence, is a 4.5, 4.6 density in the area. All the available services are there for water, sewer, access. We don't have any problems with that. This development is going to be units for sale. They're not going to be rental units, so there'll be homeowners, and they will be a part of the same homeowners association as the rest of the Candlewood Court development. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition?
I find myself before y'all again. Mr. Mayor, members of council, when I studied poli-sci, we learned the term precedent. When a council or governing body sets precedent in granting rezonings in these areas, especially Candlewood Court, we need to look at what can the roads handle? What can we safely handle in these areas and in these neighborhoods? Respectfully, the area is already crowded on all of the main roads leading into that area, and even some of the main side roads leading into that area that cyclists like myself take because Timberlake or Ford or any of these main roads are unsafe to bike on. With that being said, I've biked in that area, and it's already crowded enough with just the limited access that is there. So with that, I ask that this council not approve it on the grounds that we need to look at our infrastructure first. We need to look at, can the roads handle it? Can the roads be able to handle more traffic? Because if we grant one, what's to stop us from granting another, or another, and then another, and then another? Because, not to sound cliche, it's a slippery slope. With that being said, like I asked y'all, please do not allow this, because it's just going to allow for more and more in the future. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition? Are there any emails or phone calls from citizens? There are none. Thank you. Would you like to offer a rebuttal?
Yeah, and I appreciate the comment. We all know that some areas, especially in the Timberlake Road area, are busy. We're not looking to come in and ask to put in I think we would by right could probably be at about 24-unit apartment. But if we got R4, it would be 24 units there. I think what we're doing there is meeting the requirements or the suggestions of the future land use map of medium density, and we're actually a little bit lower than what that is. We're almost close to what a single-family R1 density is when you look at it per acre unit. So I think what we're doing there, and if you look at the surrounding areas of what is there, a lot of commercial, and down on this street, especially between us and the Kroger, it's some high-density stuff to the east side of us. I think going back and looking at doing just an expansion of the existing patio home development is definitely a good fit in the area.
The public hearing is now closed, and the matter rests with council. Comments, discussion? Councilmember Feraldi.
Move to deny.
Second.
Councilmember Feraldi.
I had a good drive-through of this neighborhood that is in Ward 4. the district I do represent, and what was interesting was noting the Florida curb. And that led me to dig a little bit and discussing with my contact in the neighborhood. It's actually privately maintained all throughout. It's my understanding by the HOA. And so that led to a discussion about, well, with this proposal, and I'm going to look to community development on this, that slip, that road for access for those homes, is that going to be a privately maintained street?
The new road coming, yeah, that's private.
Okay. So that was a concern of mine. No, you're fine, but thank you. That was a concern of mine in that this is going to be serviced privately when the HOA and the residents are already having some issues with how that's happening and occurring. I know that's not necessarily for our bearing, but that was worth noting. Parking was atrocious. And that's with the current houses there. There was signs all over the place, but as gun-free zones signs fail to be efficient, so were the no parking signs. There was at least 5 cars around the entire cul-de-sac, which tells me that they're already experiencing some issues with the amount of vehicles coming in and out of that corridor. The other concern I had was for green space. This is the only green space for that entire development that community has some access to, and at least allowing some breathing room. And in observing that and in discussions with the constituent who I had a lengthy conversation with, that's used quite heavily as a place to walk your dog or whatnot. Now I do realize maybe they probably shouldn't be taking their dog there if it's not their property, but that's between them and the owner. Needless to say, it speaks again to a comment I've made before and in the past. As a conservative, there's a word in there, I think, with the environment that we fail to use, and it's the word conserve. And in looking in 24502, we need to be doing this in a very smart way. I very much value and appreciate the intention of the developer to have this proposal align with the community, fit, make sense. I think that I can't say how much I appreciate that. However, it does burden me the amount of development that was referenced surrounding this area as a reason to bring more in. It's a high dense area, so we might as well put some density in here, realizing you could certainly do a lot more. It's for that reason that I'm drawing an oppositional stance as well. And so with that, I cast my motion, and I hope my colleagues will respect the district, respect the ward, and truly understand what is being felt by the folks out in 24502.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. You know, as I look at this, what the proposal is, and I can appreciate the fact that there's 6 units, so it doesn't sound like it's much, but a couple things that are just really troubling. So you're going from an R1, which is the lowest impact residential, to an R4, the highest density residential, just like that in an area, is what's being proposed. And the developer, or the engineer, stated that if this was R4 by right, they could put in 24 units on a little over an acre. Fortunately, there's a proffer that says we won't do any more than 6. But what happens, though, when you go from R1 to R4 is now people don't maybe necessarily look at those proffers. They look at the future land use map, they look at the neighborhood zoning that says, oh, that one's R4, so I can be R4. And that's what happens, the erosion of the neighborhoods from protecting the single family, because you're subtly change from an R1, usually it goes from an R1 maybe to an R2, then an R3 and an R4. This goes right, not pass and go, from R1 to an R4. Other properties are going to be looking at this and saying, that's adjacent to an R4. And so because it's adjacent to an R4, now we can do an R4 here. So I don't see a compelling reason why we should say, let's change this from an R1 to an R4 for the myriad of reasons I just mentioned. And so I'll be voting against it, and I hope the rest of you will as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilder.
Just so I'm clear. So it's currently in R1, and how many, and it's townhomes, correct? Or
Well, it's vacant right now.
Beg your pardon?
It's vacant. There's,
No, but they're planning to build townhomes?
oh, they are planning to
Yes.
build townhomes.
Okay.
Yes.
And how many by right can they do?
Townhomes are not allowed in R1.
Okay.
So they couldn't build any townhomes there. They could go 2.9 units per acre or 3 and change, so you have to round down. You can't build a half a house. Probably three single-family homes.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
Bear with me, I have a little bit of a lengthy statement here. So this is what I've been hearing over time, is every time we have a development that comes for 24502, for the neighbor, I live in 24502, I've sat through several development issues. It is the cause of overcrowdedness, it is the fabric of neighborhoods changing, it is the traffic that we listen to. And so I'm hearing on council a desire to not have development anymore in 24502. And I say that, and the reason I'm asking and I present it like that is because developers spend their money to get to this point in front of us. And there's a lot of staff time that goes in front of that. And so every time we hit a development, and it happens on 24502, I sit on the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority looked for land to figure out where to put its next development. And it decided to put it on the development that it owned, which was, we're talking about Darrington Hills, because they did search around the city to figure out what was the most appropriate property. So we have a philosophical, in my opinion, we're at a philosophical point. One side of town, the land goes up for sale. That was one of the, 24502 is one of the areas with the biggest farm and that sort of thing. I believe it was farm property at the time, and it was sold, and now it's sheets, and now it's commercial, now it's apartments. And you know, one side of council is saying, and then supporting the neighborhood, and I live there, so I understand all of what the neighbors are saying. But how many more projects do we have in the pipeline for 24502? And if every project is going to be an issue of too congested, too many apartments, and we have future development, in other words, we have a growth of a city projected to be up to 10,000. Where are they going to go? And so my thing is, rather than fight about a development in what is perceived to be an oversaturated area, why not look at all of the projects in the pipeline, and council determines that there's a moratorium on development of certain projects in the city and or a change of the flume. And I'm saying that because certain parts of town, which is then politicized with neighbors, those areas of town, land does not go up for sale like it does in other parts of town. And so if we're going to have this philosophical / political back and forth, why doesn't council just make the decision so the developers and people in the future looking to develop apartments, townhomes, single-family homes know that this part of town is off limits unless it's single-family home development? Now, the other part of that is if we limit apartments and limit apartments and townhomes, but we are considered a college town. And I've talked to a couple of our city team members, I know one in particular, about this, then that means that we have an overflow of developers purchasing single-family occupied homes for college students in traditional neighborhoods, which is an issue for us too. So I'm presenting all of this on video, on camera, so people won't take it back to say that they're just oversaturating your area. It's for a reason. I mean, it's not us oversaturating. It's where the land is available and by right, developing for zone. So I think it's incumbent on council to determine how do we want particular areas of town to develop and or grow, because commercial is following that development. Now, when that land was totally open And we were preparing for college students coming, thousands. By the years, we developed Cornerstone, we developed Windhurst, we developed these developments because we had to have somewhere to house them. Now we've grown, commercial has followed, more development has followed, but now we have a philosophical, we don't want any more now. So I asked at the last meeting, have we had a conversation with our colleges and development? There are other towns that neighborhoods develop, the neighborhoods transition into majority college housing. And so, that's what is happening in other towns that I could bring up the names of. So I think we need to have a bigger conversation than just one development, two developments at a time. How many more in the pipeline is what I want neighbors to understand. And all of us, the entire city. And if we're not going to want to oversaturate, what is the point of oversaturation based on our city administration and or other input? And should the flume be changed? Future land use map be changed? And what does that mean for our colleges? What does that mean for our single family home neighborhood development? And where in this city can we incentivize these homes, this type of development, where? Because every time we get a developer coming, they've invested money, the neighbors are riled up, and I say riled up because I understand we went through Windsor Hills. I understand. I live in Richland Hills, so I know services, congestion, no sidewalks, minimal lights. Like, I understand it. Septic tanks, I understand it, right? So, but we as a council, I think, can give better direction to this conversation and this debate that we don't do, because it's easier to just pick and choose every development, either, what we will or won't do per development. I'm saying it's a bigger picture. I'm asking the neighbors to understand it's a bigger picture. And, I want to hear from you. We hear the emails, we understand, but every debate, we might have 10 more of these in the pipeline. I don't know. I'm just saying that as a number. And if that's the case, I don't want every time one side of town to be pitted against another side of town because this seems oversaturated, this is allowed, they're voting on this. Sometimes it's a factor of land availability and by right zoning. And so that's what I wanted to bring to this conversation. I didn't know when to, we were debating about letting people speak, not speak. I'm fine with everyone talking. But this constant back and forth, I think, needs to be addressed by council, and I think the city staff needs to give us more direction as opposed to pitting developers against neighbors, neighbors against across town, when it's some very simple factors here that are driving this. And we have the opportunity to just put a stop line.
Thank you, Dr. Tweedy. Quickly, I was just going to ask, does city staff want to offer any kind of response?
So, Dr. Tweedy's been very consistent in her remarks and her expectations. We've offered that this was between last week and this week because we had a tight turnaround. Haven't had a chance to talk to the colleges and universities in this depth that I think you were expecting, but do have as part of our comprehensive plan, which looks at the overall strategy for the city. It was Rachel who leaned over and said that she put housing into the RFP purposefully so that that'll be a component of a comprehensive look at the city. So I think it's in those conversations about the comprehensive plan that each of you will be engaged and that we'll talk about the area that we've been talking about quite a bit. And as to what we have in queue, I'll kind of look over my shoulder. I'm not sure how many projects we have coming out of that area, but we have at least, I think, one more this evening that we're talking about. So I can get you that number and a follow-up. So that's my response.
Well, just quickly, Councilmember Helgeson, followed by Councilmember Feraldi.
Thank you. When we're looking at this, I guess there's several things. One, they can't do this by right. Second, it's incumbent upon, the only way they can change it is if we vote to change it. So the neighbors understand little protection, and quite frankly, I don't think we are supposed to be getting direction from city staff. We are the elected representative that are supposed to give the direction to the city staff, not the other way around. And so before us is the fact that we're going to try to represent the citizens, the neighborhoods that have said enough. You know, we've seen these developments and these apartments go up in 24502 and 24501 for a long time, and it happens incrementally. And so one thing that don't have to have a long conversation on it. All you got to do is say, no, we're not going to change the future land use map. No, we're not going to change your specific zoning and allow you to build a lot of these new rental units. And so I think what we have before us, again, is the lowest density that was told by everybody. Everybody sees the zoning maps. It says, here's what it is. It's the lowest density residential. They're asking to now just instantly go to the highest. That is what I think is bad, and that's why I do hope, and I think it sends a pretty clear message. You know, some of these I think that are already in queue are actually by right. I think Mr. Martin said it a couple weeks ago at one of our retreats or something. There may be 1,000 to 2,000 apartments that are coming soon that are done by right because they're already on an R4. They already can do that by right without council's action. Let's not more fully enable more by changing from an R1 that protects the neighborhood to an R4. Let's protect the citizens, let's protect their neighborhoods, and vote this down today. I think that sends a pretty good message to the folks that want to build more apartments and want a zoning change at least.
Thank you, sir. I apologize for interjecting. I would remind council that every zoning decision is independent of itself,
Yep,
not
absolutely.
necessarily to consider sending any messages to anyone. As City Council will recall and has been stated by the movement, Council can consider creation of convenient, attractive, and harmonious communities, reducing congestion, ensuring adequate police and fire protection, civil defense, transportation, water, and sewage, preventing against destruction or encroachment of historic areas, overcrowding of land, obstruction of light and air, and so on. So each decision is individual. I just wanted to interject that.
Councilmember Tweedy, for the bulk of your commentary, I have to submit I do agree. I think we need to revisit a lot of this, but you lost me when you said it's not us oversaturating, because that land, as it was described, has been oversaturated by the direction of this council significantly. 1125, Kendall Square, the Gardens on Timberlake, West Edge, Windhurst Villas, City Place at Windhurst, the Gables, the Commons, Vista Dreaming Creek, Timber Ridge 2, Legacy at Linden Park, Burton Creek, Logan's Landing, Heritage Park Apartments, Heritage Court Townhomes, Mill Woods, Old Mill, Mills Crossing, Wexford Place, Aaron Commons, Fountain Gate, the Reserve, the View at College Square, College Park. There's a lot besides Bella Rose. There's a lot at the end of Miller's Rest Apartments. There's a lot 572 block on Leesville Road. Townhomes at Lockwood. Dillard and Enterprise, there's a slated development. Laxton and Enterprise, there's a slated development. Old Graves Mill, there's a massive development going in. That one is a little bit more of a Windhurst, so it has a little bit more to offer. But we also took industrial sites that has been so adamantly said we've got to bring business in by you, and yet we turn that into residential apartment. All of this is being done within a quarter mile to a mile radius. And at some point, we've got to say we need to be consistent. The only ones being consistent here are Jeff and myself, who day in and day out, when something like this comes forward, we're analyzing this and saying, for those reasons articulated by the city attorney, we've got to pump the brakes. And the fact is, this council has chosen year in and year out, time and time again, on the side of the developer instead of those who live in this neighborhood. And I'll call it, I don't think you understand what is going on in this community, in this part of town, because quite frankly, every single person I talk to, regardless of the shootings, the taxes, the schools, which, by the way, I just took a tour of Heritage Elementary, and they are slammed because of the amount of development in the Timberlake area and the way they're zoned. Everyone I talk to in this part of town, this is the number one concern, is how are we developing 24502? I humbly submit, if this was put in a different zip code, it wouldn't even see the light of day. and that's not right.
Thank you. I just want to remind members about not making assumptions about other members and their intentions and what they do or do not know. I'm going to Dr. Tweedy and then followed by Councilmember Nelson.
I'll defer to Councilmember Nelson, and then I'll follow him.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. It really is a tough call for me. On one hand, I look at the developer's proposal, only 6 units, and by representation, those 6 units are going to be owned, which is consistent with Councilmember Helgeson's ardent pleas as to what we should encourage and preserve. So that's very appealing compared to something else that might be able to be done there. But I think in weighing the alternative considerations, I'm very familiar with this property. I had some clients that lived at the end of Beverly Hills Circle before it got connected over to Timberlake Road. And all of that area is R1, single-family homes, some nice amenities, open spaces, and things that neighborhood wants to preserve. Then I remember the conversation we had, I think it was in 2019, in dealing with the importance of green space when Gardens on Timberlake was being developed across from Beverly Hills Circle. And there were multifamily units constructed on a R4C tract of land, and a critical consideration was all of the green space that was going to be preserved with walking trails and other pedestrian amenities at the western side of that multifamily development, because green space is so important to that neighborhood, to separate it from what's being developed on the Timberlake roadside and what is R1 in the back. This, as pointed out, is a green space. And given all of the conversations that went on with regard to the Gardens on Timberlake development, I don't think that plea is something that we should quickly neglect and ignore when considering what to be done right across the street on Beverly Hills Circle, Candlewood Court, and the private street. I also look at everything on the zoning map to the northwest of this particular tract, and it's all R1. So to transition this out of R1 is to continue to eliminate the buffer between the commercial on Timberlake and the residential in the rear. The next consideration in my mind is the fact that Councilmember Feraldi represents this ward, and he's expressed his opinions, and although it doesn't establish anything in stone, whenever a ward representative on this council advocates for a particular position, I have always given some deference to that point of view. So for these reasons, I would not be in favor of this, although it does have some very appealing qualities to it.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Let me ask, as far as the planning commission, did they approve this project?
Yes.
Planning Commission did recommend approval at their meeting on August 12th. They did have some discussion about, rezoning R1 land. I think they've heard from council that you have concerns about that. So there was some discussion noted in the minutes. Ultimately, I think looking at the context of the surrounding uses, they ended up approving it. They recommended approval of the petition.
But did they have the discussion about moving it from R1 to R4?
Not specifically.
Okay.
Thank you. I would like to respond to Councilmember Wilder's question. If you look at the notes from the commission, the vote was 3-1 in favor, but there were 2 members absent. If they had been there, it certainly could have been a tie vote, and that would have not approved it.
And I understand the neighbors and things of that nature, but no one came to any purpose. The public hearing held. Did anybody come against the project?
There was a public hearing
Okay, all right. You know, I think my thing is this 6 units versus a lot more. And since I've been on city council, since I've been on city council, there's been so many challenges about apartments. We want more single families. So again, getting in line with Councilman Tweedy's comment, you know, I think it's just again a bigger conversation. You know, and then also continue to ask, why aren't there more single families being built? You know, I think we talked to a developer, they just said it wasn't beneficial financially for them to build individual houses because of the requirements of that nature. So I guess we as a council or planning commission need to see, our council, what we can do to encourage more, again, more single family homes to be built where it is advantageous, whether restrictions or requirements or whatever, I don't know, whatever the case may be, just to look into that. And then also whether we need to give more direction to the planning commission. You know, if they don't, I don't know what the quorum is, but if they have like half the members out, they don't have a quorum, I would assume. So whether they need to hold on something, or either give the planning commission more direction in looking at properties in areas of Ward 2 or 3, whatever it is, Ward 3 and 4, and more property, especially the ones that's really near Liberty, where if you go to Cornerstone, it's full of college students, you know? So we need to have, again, that goes to another part, having a conversation with our colleges. You know, how many college students are you having on campus versus off campus? And if they're not on campus, then you know you limit a certain number on campus. But when you do that, where are the students gonna go? So it needs to be kind of a conversation there too. You know, they gotta live somewhere. You know, they can't be homeless. So they're going to be living in apartments, and then cause for more apartments being needed. So we need to have a conversation with our colleges as well to see what is your plan in housing, building more college housing on campus, so we wouldn't have so many overflow into our community. All right, thank you.
Is there additional comment before we, Dr. Tweedy?
So, of the listings of the developments that have occurred on that side of town, how many were by right and council mitigated the number of units by its decision? So in other words, someone proffered to get less units in a development, because that happens. And I think people ignore that fact that there is a by right, and then people, you know, get less units in because council takes an action. And then, so now we are turning down homeowner occupied units, purchase units. I just want to make sure that people understand that. And then when we talk about industrial sites, I think most people who work in workforce and or manufacturing industry know they want pad-ready sites. So we're talking about, yes, we allowed livability on these developments or land that was industrial zone that sat, that someone sold. Again, it gets back to the purpose of who's selling property, what's their use going to be for it, how long has property sat, and it gets to the development of Lynchburg. It gets to what type of city are we going to be. It's just like downtown. People oppose downtown. It was a ghost town. No development, no coming downtown. Somebody had vision to vote for development of downtown, and it has developed to where we are now, tripling the investment that's been made. So again, all I'm asking is, we have done what we can do on this side of town, which has brought commercial, which has brought investment, which helps pay taxes, which helps bring folks here, and what town are we going to grow into? And we can have all the political arguments we want back and forth, and we can try to make a zing moment, but the point is, we still have future projects coming before us. So, I mean, if we're really serious about this right now, rather than pitting everyone, I'm for proposing an amendment for a moratorium on development on this side of town, until we get a better conversation going about what projects we want to see, what's in the future pipeline, rather than to have this back and forth. So how serious are we about helping the neighbors, understanding our traditional neighborhoods? How far do we want to go? And that's my point. I'm willing to vote for a moratorium on development in 24502.
Quickly, I'm just going to acknowledge Councilmember Helgeson first, and then Councilmember Feraldi, just based on You had spoken most recently.
Councilman, I have a very brief moment, so if you don't mind,
Yeah.
forgive me.
By all means.
How many of these developments have you voted against, Councilmember Tweedy? Don't need to respond. The fact is, you voted for most of them. If only now we're reconsidering that we must put a moratorium on development, that is a foolish endeavor, because some of these developments do make sense. The challenge is, there hasn't been one that I can name that this council has rejected of any capacity that I can think of. We have voted for them time and time again. This part of town is tired of it. So if you want to use them to come up with the zingers that you yourself have used on many occasions, don't pit the political. It's entirely political, because the politics is this neighborhood is tired of it, and they're willing to vote accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to
I would like
just
to
understand.
rebut
Yes,
and say a
ma'am. Yes,
statement.
yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Okay, so again, are we willing to put future developments back in the pot of debating? If we are for the neighborhoods and we are for no development, then we are willing to put the vote on the line that we are not going to, because if you don't, then that's saying you're open to more apartments in 24502.
I'm glad it takes an election to get you to this point.
Let me tell you something. I spent 8 years and 25 years living on this side of town. I'm glad 2 years in, you realize you're congested with traffic. But all I'm saying is that are you willing to put a vote on that no more development so the neighbors can rest easy when they go home? If now everything we did was wrong, which brought a lot of commercial development on that side of town for the development of colleges and universities and our Lynchburg residents, then are we willing to put that on the line to say there's going to be no more development in 24502, and it will help developers understand where their investments need to be made? That's my point. We can let everybody go home tonight and rest very easy, political or no. No apartments on the rest of the side of town, 24502, only single-family development neighborhoods.
Councilmember Helgeson, and then I'm going to move us towards the vote if I could. Okay.
So, I think the issue really isn't going from 3 houses to 6 condos. Okay? I think a lot of neighbors would say, that's not that big of a deal. Going from 3 houses to 6 condos. The biggest issue that is an insurmountable hill is going from an R1, the lowest density residential, throwing away any protection for the neighborhood here and beyond, is to go from R1 to R4. If the neighbors were looking at this saying, oh, it's just a few more condos, that's not that big of a deal. They can already build by right 3. But we can't set any more precedent that says we're going to erode the rights of the citizens that live in that neighborhood, that we're going to willy-nilly vote for yet another change to a zoning. So I hope we vote against this, and quite frankly, I think everybody knows that a moratorium on rezoning just due to public hearing options and everything is illegal, I believe. I mean, you can't just blanketly say, you gotta allow for each project to have its day. I mean, you can't just say we're not gonna, hear anymore. We all know that would be an illegal motion. But the issue is going from R1 to R4. That's what's asking for us today. And let's just say no to change to R1 to R4. We'll get 3 houses that'll be built. We'll get 3 houses that'll be probably owner occupied, and it's gonna be fantastic. We're gonna preserve the neighborhood. 3 houses are built and we're done. So.
Thank you
Good.
very much.
Oh, and can you restate the motion too? Because I think it's
yes,
a motion to deny.
I will in a moment. But first, I do, Mr. City Attorney, would you like to weigh in on whether what Dr. Tweedy is recommending is feasible?
I suppose that for purposes of this motion, a moratorium isn't something council would want to consider. I think that's something that staff can look into as it relates to looking at its plan. But at this point, what I would advise council is to look at the specific project before it, information provided by the movement as to whether it meets the appropriate considerations that a governing body can consider for zoning determinations. And make a decision accordingly.
Okay. Does that answer your questions, Dr. Tweed?
I understand, and I would like to hear from the neighborhoods, how many more buildings would they like during public hearing? How much more building would they really like? I keep hearing no apartments, no townhomes. That's what we're hearing, right? That's what I'm seeing. And I just want to hear what is the number or threshold, because I'm hearing that every project can be a pick or choose. I'm wondering why it's a pick or choose based on who people know or don't know or talk to or don't talk to. But it's a pick or choose, and it just depends on what they determine is development they want to see for the interest of what they have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, I have one quick question for staff, and then, I'm sorry. Well, I'm afraid the hearing is closed. I did have a question, though, for staff, which is, has anybody indicated any interest in developing single-family homes on this lot that we're aware of? Just.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Well, I'll just say before we call the vote that I'm feeling, I think, conflicted is the word that Councilmember Nelson used, and I'm feeling conflicted about this for a few reasons. One, as the petitioner noted, the Flume does recommend medium-density residential here. This would be homeowner-occupied townhomes. It's only a little more than double, 3 to 6 units, less than what R4 permit, though I understand Councilmember Helgeson's point, which is well taken, that this is a pretty big difference from R1 if we were to move it to R4. I take that point well, though there is a proffer to limit it to 6. And and proffers travel with the property, is that right? I know, I'm confirming it for the listener.
I was listening to John. What's up?
You're right. Proffers,
My apologies.
proffers travel with the property.
Yes,
So-
proffers are part of the zoning permanently until someone else rezones it to amend a proffer or go to a different
So
zoning
it's not
district.
as if somebody could come in and let's say this townhomes are never built and somebody comes in and say, it's R4C, I want to go out and build whatever, right?
Right, they would be required to follow the proffers that exist,
Right.
regardless of ownership.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. And it's not expected that by the planning division anyway, that traffic is going to be demonstrably affected by these units. Is that right?
That's correct. The city traffic engineer didn't require a traffic study for a project of this small magnitude.
Yeah. And I think it is telling that that though I understand the ward representative raises concerns, which counts for a lot, that no members of the immediate neighborhood were also here in opposition, which I think is just a data point for us to take into consideration. So, I'm conflicted on it. I lean towards our approving it this evening, so I'll just offer that, but I very much appreciate the concerns and hesitations that the members have. I'm going to ask that we go ahead and, if we could, vote on the motion, which is to deny the petition. Okay? All right, please cast your vote. All right, and the motion passes 4-2, and the petition is denied. All right, we'll move forward to item 8 on our agenda, consideration of adopting a resolution approving the CUP to allow the construction of a new 500-seat sanctuary at Providence Church located at 108 Melinda Drive. Staff will provide a brief summary of the request, and I believe it's Ms. Fresheisen again.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of council. Providence Church is petitioning for a CUP at 108 Melinda Drive to allow the construction of a new 500-seat sanctuary in an R4 high-density residential district. The subject property is zoned B3C, Community Business District conditional, near the corner of Melinda Drive and Wards Ferry Road, with the remainder zoned R4 high-density residential district. The proposed sanctuary is located in the R4 portion. Churches and their associated uses are permitted in the R4 district upon approval of a conditional use permit by City Council. Planning Commission recommended approval of this petition at their meeting on September 28th.
Is there anyone to make a presentation?
Good evening, Vice Mayor, members of council. My name is Amy Sipe. I'm the majority partner of AccuPoint Surveying and Design representing the church this evening. Providence Church acquired this property from a previously use similar. They had some change out. The church left and went somewhere else. Another church, Providence Church, came in. This, as Rachel mentioned, this property does have two zonings. Part of it is also in Campbell County, so a portion of the sanctuary, the existing sanctuary and the building is in Campbell County. So it will be across city-county lines. Because of their recent growth in their parishioners, they need extra parking, and they are outgrowing their current sanctuary. They plan to add on to the current sanctuary for such time that they could accommodate that, along with the extra parking. At such time that they outgrow that expansion, they would then build the proposed sanctuary that you see on the plan, and they would then convert the previously used space to classrooms or other type office uses for their staff. They do plan other amenities such as a fire pit, a pavilion, some fields for children to play soccer, things of that nature. So keeping that green space near Wards Ferry Road. And happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Are there any emails or phone calls? There are none. Thank you. No rebuttal needed then. Public hearing is closed and the matter rests with council. Councilmember Helgeson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. You know, I think I mentioned before that I don't have a conflict of interest because I'm not a member of this church, but I go. I don't think they would officially admit me as a member. But what is really neat, as Ms. Sipe mentioned, is this church used to be, I've represented this area for a long time, and it used to be Covenant Presbyterian Church. And Covenant Presbyterian Church, a lot of the old members have passed away or left or whatnot, and basically the church closed. You know, we always talk about how nice it is to repurpose or to reutilize a building rather than just having one sit there. With churches, for some reason, that rarely ever happens. Somebody has an old church, I don't want your old church, I want my new church. But Providence bought this church, bought the building, and is now using it. It's unbelievable. They had a fantastic celebration Sunday for Reformation Day. Kids everywhere, lots of fun and neighborhood cookouts. Fantastic. And so great neighbors, great to the neighbors. This is, I hope we can approve this unanimously, and I'll make a motion for approval. Make a motion for approval? Say that a little louder.
Understood. Heard. Well, I will second it. Would you like to make additional comments?
I do. As I mentioned earlier this afternoon at our roll call, you know, the one thing that we do, and I hope that we can get this figured out, you know, the church is really doing lots of good things, and then to see the plans that require a church who is trying to, you know, it's a nonprofit that's doing good things in the community, a church, having school and having Bible school and Bible studies and whatnot, and to take a lot of the money, that $100,000 or whatever it has to be, just to build a sidewalk to nowhere. That, I would much rather see them using their money going elsewhere. So I will hopefully approve this today. But I do hope that before that build-out happens, that they do not have to have that $100,000 wasted on the city sidewalk. That's going from no sidewalk to no sidewalk, just a sidewalk. And that sidewalk to nowhere is not money that should be spent or should have to be spent by force of government. So I know that's at a later date.
No, thank you for making that point. I don't have additional comments beyond what's already been added. Councilmember Wilder, followed by Councilmember Feraldi. Councilmember Feraldi, would you like to go?
Thank you. Why is the sidewalk required? I should have asked this last time. I recognize that. Thank you.
So, digging deep between the work session and the public hearing this evening, I went upstairs and did my best to do some quick research. You'll recall in 2016 when we amended the zoning ordinance, initially we required required sidewalks with all site plans. And that was for new development or redevelopment, which is things like additions, that sort of thing. We found that we were getting some cases where they weren't as, it wasn't quite as equitable. There were properties with very long frontages, and also properties with frontages on very tiny streets, like less than 100 trips per day. In 2017, council directed staff to proceed with amendments to the sidewalk ordinance, and we put in some flexibility a little bit with it, requiring sidewalks along street frontage for all new development, and requiring sidewalks along primary and secondary frontages when the redevelopment of an existing site reached a certain threshold. And when they got to that threshold, they got an additional amount of disturbance or improvements, and then at that point, they would be required to put in sidewalks.
Curiosity, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Out of curiosity, with this sidewalk, is the church gonna get stormwater and connections?
Connections?
By taking out the divot and putting in a sidewalk, I'm assuming they're at least gonna get the benefit of the water going in. Ms. Sipe is shaking her head no. Thank you, it's okay. When was the Latter-day Saints church put in, do we know? Right next door?
I don't have that available.
Don't need to know it. My point is,
Prior to this ordinance.
of course. My point is, I don't think the folks at Latter-day Saints needed to do it, and now simply because of a policy change, we're going to do it here. I want to support this. I just can't. I want to give deference to Councilmember Helgeson and the fact that he is supporting this, even though he has this reservation. I'm a pastor's kid. I guess I have a softie. There's a part of me that says this is really not a needed part of this, and the fact that we're considering, mandating to the church that they have to put in this sidewalk is a little bit far-fetched in my mind. I'm not. I'll consult with the attorney if I'm allowed to vote against it for that reason, as you guys speak. So thank you.
Remove that sidewalk? I thought that was required of them. If we can remove it, I'd love to amend the motion without having a sidewalk in there. Can that be done?
Mr. City Attorney, is that feasible?
Well, I suppose it depends on, like Councilmember Helgeson had asked, it comes down to what purpose the sidewalk serves. So if it's something that has to be as part of this project.
But city ordinance requires that development carries a sidewalk, is that correct?
Yes, so the code gives the zoning administrator to lessen or eliminate the requirement for sidewalks where slope is an issue, if there's a stormwater conveyance channel, like a ditch, and it can't be moved behind the ditch, or if the vehicle count on the street is less than 100 trips per day. So in code, it's left up to the zoning administrator. I'm not sure if council can.
Sorry, Councilmember. The zoning administrator determined that none of those applied?
Thus far, I mean, we typically get more into detail at the site plan phase. So, I don't know that specific conversations have been had about the, okay, yeah.
So if you've ever been out along this street, I go to church on Wards Ferry Road at Compassion Nazarene. We've got a giant slope. So part of that, when we move forward with things, has come into play. This is actually fairly flat because of the way it comes in. It's the large field. So the waiver for the slope requirement was not met because of the slope percentage. It doesn't meet that, as well as technically, yes, the ditch can be moved behind the sidewalk, but again, that's at the church's cost, and it meets the code. I had projects going on in 16, 17 when we did that, and so by frontage, the formula, it doesn't meet that threshold, and clearly it's on Wards Ferry Road, so the trips aren't way more than 100.
Very much. Councilmember Feraldi still had the floor, actually. Are you done, Councilmember? Okay. Councilmember Helgeson, followed by Dr. Tweedy.
So with that, there's some things, as
mentioned that part of the properties in Campbell County, you know, the property, you got some on Melinda Drive, another part that's, I mean, if there's a way, can we pull the sidewalk portion of this? I mean, in the ordinance? I mean, I'd like to amend the motion that we approve it without requiring the sidewalk.
In that instance, it would be needed, I'm not comfortable as a second on that.
It sounds like, especially if it's left to the zoning administrator's discretion, I mean, I don't know if that's something city council could do. I mean, I wouldn't be comfortable answering that without speaking to the zoning administrator and looking further into it.
May I answer my question?
So the answer is no. The sidewalk is required by the zoning ordinance regardless of the conditional use permit. As Ms. Fresheisen stated, it was put in with the 2016 adoption of the new zoning ordinance. It was amended subsequently to relax that requirement, irregardless of whether council chooses to adopt this CUP tonight. They would have to put that in. If council wants to revisit sidewalk discussions, they would have to collectively as a body direct staff to advertise that for public hearings, and that's a much bigger discussion than tonight.
So if we approve the CUP as presented, and if they're not going to, they're looking at the plans and getting ready. So for example, if council then next month or two or whatever says, hey, this sidewalk to nowhere business hasn't been helpful, and we can amend that. I think actually advertise and change that zoning ordinance. So
yeah, that's a much bigger discussion about sidewalk to nowhere or not. I think it's a matter of how we infill the infrastructure across the city, the same way that we do water lines, sewer lines. Curb and gutter is also being required on this site, I believe. So it's a city infrastructure, yes.
Since the property does abut Campbell County, and part of it is in Campbell County, I mean, there may be some other saving grace there. The property on Melinda Drive, there is no sidewalk anywhere, but the property actually goes down to Ward's Ferry. So that means they'd also have to put a sidewalk on Ward's Ferry where there's no other sidewalk as well?
Which would connect into the sidewalk on Simon's Run.
Is there a way to have a sidewalk at the bottom, but not the whole element of Ward's, or of Melinda?
The ordinance would require it on both Melinda and Ward's Ferry.
Yeah. And so that's something I can understand if it connects to somewhere that is somewhere, but anyway, that's
that's a much bigger discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Dr. Tweedy, followed by Dr. Wilder.
Thank you. Sometimes I have to ask clarifying questions because, one, I just heard that it does require the sidewalks and that it is a church, so it is a nonprofit. We understand that. And so my question is, what is the valuation of doing good in our community that allows ordinances and regulations to be changed for certain or particular nonprofits? And if we're picking and choosing, you know, how many other developments and or could we pick and choose about sidewalks not being required? And how does that affect development? Going back to, again, I'm mentioning the flume. So I go to church, I love church, love God. I'm just asking if we're picking and choosing which projects, pet or otherwise, we want to give some allowance to not follow the guidelines. It is a bigger conversation, but I'm just trying to figure out how we value this conversation.
So going back to the original, the initial requirement for sidewalks with the zoning ordinance rewrite, we talked a lot about sidewalks being more than just about the use that is on the parcel, that sidewalks improve quality of life for Lynchburg citizens, the citizens in this neighborhood that the church is a part of. it promotes active and healthy living, safety along the roadways, and also shows social equity through transportation choices, because sidewalks are not just a nice to have. For some people, they're necessary to get them from where they need to go to work, to the store, to the bus stop. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, it does. It gives more clarification about what a sidewalk does. I'm just wondering, are we setting a precedence for, is that where we're going? And setting a precedence for how we pull out requirements for projects based on individual preferences of council members. That's all I'm asking. Or lobbying. So I'm just asking, that's all. Because I know we have developers who might be interested in that as well. But is there a difference between giving a preference to a developer versus a nonprofit in that? I don't know who I'm asking the question to, whether it's Ms. Fresheisen, Mr. Martin, our city attorney.
I suppose as it relates to making zoning decisions.
Correct.
You would want to treat them equally.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Dr. Wilder, followed by Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. I have, my head is everywhere because I'm just, it's like it's spinning. About just getting, I'm gonna take pieces of just make it short because I'm just getting a little late. As far as the sidewalk piece, I think we need to have another conversation in reference to that. So hopefully at some point on our agenda, I've heard about the sidewalk continuously, and whether some developers may be a factor that maybe affects them, but they don't really want to do development here. So as we have that conversation about the growth of our city, the growth of apartments, growth of townhouses, where to build, where to not build, I think in that also the conversation, if we could have some developers or some architects, I know, young lady, you've been here several times, I would love to hear what they have to say about developments. We want to be we want to listen to the residents, but you also want to be a business-friendly community. And that's why when I look at these decisions, as Councilmember Tweedy mentioned, they're investing funds, they're investing money, they're buying property, and for a profit, their business, and you want to be a business-friendly community. So in balancing all of that, I like to hear what the developers have to say as well, because you want to be a business-friendly community. How do you grow economically if you're against all businesses, or if you don't want to support the businesses that do come into our community? If you have a tract of land that's not being used, period, and then it's just being vacant, then it just sits there. Like the part in Windhurst that was on the edge of that corner, it just wasn't being developed, and somebody wanted to do something with it, even though they didn't follow through. But again, I just need to have, I'd like to have a conversation with some developers and just hear what you have to say, some contractors, hear what you have to say as far as development, even with economic development, and hear that conversation of why don't they build more single-family houses? What can we do to encourage that? What laws do we need to look into in our city that would kind of be more encouraging them to build more single families? And then also that second conversation with the universities about the other piece about how much we can do, going back to that prior conversation, how much we can do with the universities, as far as having more students on campus versus off campus. So there's this whole conversation, my mind is just spinning. So again, I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Nelson.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I do appreciate Councilmember Helgeson's arguments that nonprofits and charitable entities bring a lot of benefit to the community, and all of our citizens benefit from them. Yet they are here, and they exist by contributions and grants from people who want to, on their own, contribute to their existence. And that poses a problem if there's a lot of infrastructure and capital improvements that are required every time they want to expand their operations. However, I am an ardent advocate of the rule of law. No one's above the law, and we all must comply with the law unless there's a rational legal reason that carves out an exception to the law as passed by the legislature of the locality, of the state, or federal. In this case, and I don't think the sidewalk's existence really is relevant to tonight's decision, but the next shoe is going to drop, if I can read the tea leaves metaphorically, as to what council wants to do down the road. and that would be to modify the ordinance. If the ordinance were modified in some way, Ms. Friesheisen, is there any physical feature or fact about this particular piece of property that you could find could justify some exemption to the requirement of sidewalks in view of all the benefits that you have cited as to what sidewalks bring to the people, to the community, to convenience, to safety? Is there anything about this particular property that would justify some additional fourth exemption to be written into that ordinance that would disallow this property from being required to have a sidewalk?
Are you asking me what other exception I would come up with in this
Yes,
case?
that might be relevant to this.
Well, you know, as the petitioner stated, it's fairly flat. I don't see a physical exception. I mean, unless council were to direct staff to do something like only on the primary street frontage, which would be Wards Ferry Road because it's a higher traffic count. I mean, if council were to amend the ordinance that way, then it would only be required on Wards Ferry Road.
So basically what you're saying, if part of the property is in a quieter community, neighborhood, maybe the sidewalk is not that necessary, but on a major street, say like Wards Ferry Road or Old Forest Road, there would be a real safety need for it.
Well, I'm not saying I necessarily agree that it's not needed on the more neighborhood level street, but that if council were to direct us to make a change like that, then it would reduce the amount required in this case significantly.
So it would come down to traffic count and population density of the neighborhood.
Mainly traffic count, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that might be helpful to council somewhere down the road. I won't be in that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Feraldi, and then I'm going to position us for the vote if we could.
That was going to be my motion after the fact. I thank you. Just for the record, in consulting with the city attorney, this is not grounds for me to vote against, so I'll be voting for it by pinching my nose.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, as somebody who's run this neighborhood, I do value sidewalks very much, but I also understand that that is not necessarily the key item here. I do want to clarify, the petitioner brought this forward, of course, understanding all the obligations that comes with this petition, including the sidewalk, presumably. Right, okay. All right. I would ask that you please cast your vote. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much. Move to item number 9. Consideration of adopting a resolution and an ordinance amending the future land use map and rezoning 1114, 1126, 1168 Old Graves Mill Road to allow for the construction of 169 apartments, 29 condominiums, office, clubhouse, pool, and 262 parking spaces. Staff will provide a brief summary of the request. Ms. Friesheisen.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and members of council. ZZ and ZZ LLC is petitioning to rezone 11 and 9300 acres located at the addresses that you listed, and also proposes to amend the future land use map from medium density residential to high density residential to allow the construction of the apartments, condos, and associated amenities as you mentioned. Planning Commission recommended approval of the future land use map amendment and rezoning petition with the proffers outlined in the packet.
Thank you very much. Now, per the motion that was adopted earlier this evening, we will be opening the public hearing. My understanding is that the petitioner does not want to present this evening. Is that correct?
Our person is not. I can if you need me to say something, but the main presenter is not.
No, we will hold that portion then until the following meeting, if that's all right. In which case, we'll move into public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of the petition? Yes, sir, you may. Yeah. I understand that, but he is, he's a citizen.
Good evening, Council, Vice Mayor. Thank you for having me here. I appreciate the time. My name is Jason Brown. I am a principal in ZZ and ZZ. I'm also a almost lifelong resident of Lynchburg. Lived here for almost all my life, 45 of my 48 years. I attend church just down the street from this location, have for 45 of 48 of my years. So I am very aware of the situation. I'm very aware of the location. My family is a long-term family in this area. We have run a business in the town. It's subsequently been sold. We are moving forward with this idea as a way to sort of answer the call, if you will, towards the housing piece and affordable housing, if you will, some of which comes with apartments, but some of which comes with townhomes. And we are offering, and some of you have heard this, many of you have not. We weren't aware that there was a 24th meeting. Maybe that's on us, that we could have come and spoken. Unfortunately, we would have liked to have done that. But we are offering in this idea a pathway to ownership. And I've listened to a lot. I think Dr. Tweedy's hitting the nail on the head, right? We have a housing shortage. There's not an easy way to create that. There's not a lot of land in Lynchburg. I can go and list, if you want me to, I can start and try through memory, but I don't think I have time, and go down Boonesboro Road, if you want me to, all the way to the end of Rivermont, and I can name all the apartment complexes all the way down that road. They were all built, 50, 60, 40, something like that years ago, when that property was where property was being sold. It was farms. My house is on a farm that was there. It is 2 acres now, not 200 acres that was split off of that. It was developed into apartments, all of it. So that's the development of our city and the way that it works. And I think Dr. Tweedy has hit the nail on the head. This property is a transitional area. It backs up to an industrial park, sits behind Scott's Insurance, across from the Humane Society, and right across from a big development that was put in just a few years ago. It's a nice transition area. What we're trying to do is create a very nice location that's below grade, not very much seen from the road, has townhouses in the back. We'll offer a homeownership program to people. When they come in, they rent, part of their rental will go towards a down payment on a townhouse. We will hold that in escrow. They will always have access to it, always, 100% of it. Once they prove creditworthiness through their continued payment of their rent, we would then offer them an opportunity to build a townhouse. Students are in this town. We want them to stay in this town. That's how we grow this town. That's how we grow our base. That's how we do all the things that I believe, as I hear, everybody wants, right? We all just maybe have different ideas of how you get there. What I find very alarming in the conversation to me is that fact that there are only certain tracts in this town that can be developed. This happens to be one that's in a transition area. I think that's my time. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor? In favor?
Thank you, Council, for hearing me. I am not necessarily in favor or against. I just come with a concern I would like the council to think about, okay? I'm an LU grad, 89. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Letitia Lowry, and I live in the O2. So, but I am a retired teacher, but I still tutor in the public city school system. My issue is I'm concerned about the schools, because I know there's going to be growth, and I'm not against growth, but and I know there needs to be housing, but where are you going to put the children that are going to come from this development? The schools are already like a full bucket of water, and if you throw a bucket of water on a full bucket of water, you're going to have a mess. So what I am saying is academics for our children are already in crisis here in Lynchburg. We're short subs, we're short teachers. Yes, some teachers are being hired, but we're still short. So if the infrastructure academically, I don't think can support this unless together you build more schools while you're building more developments, so that even though I know with 50,000 or whatever that may come, that they're not all going to have children, but there are going to be some children, and there are going to be more children in the future. So I'm just saying, I'm not opposed to growth. I'm just saying, think about the other infrastructure that comes with the city, like our academic system, that cannot take on this all of a sudden when we're in a shortage for teachers and subs, and the buildings don't have the room that we have now. Sometimes art is on a cart, and so is music's on a cart, and where are we going to put all these kids? I'm just saying, let's think about building some schools along with it, and so that both can be built and grow together, and nobody's overwhelmed. Thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak in favor? Is there anyone to speak in opposition?
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, when you have a neighborhood such as Old Grays Mill and Grays Mill, once again, our roads cannot take nearly 200 units. If my math is correct, which it rarely is, 198 units. So, as Dr. Tweedy said, why not just put a memorandum in place? Just stop all development until we can have a discussion with the communities involved. Why not stop all development until we can look at the infrastructure in place? Can our roads handle an additional, if we're going to average 1.5 to 2 cars per unit, we're looking at an additional 300 to 400 cars a day, living there, and those cars are going to move, even if they just go from to and from work, and that is it. That's at least another 800 trips a day. When you go from that 800, but you're also going to have groceries, you're going to have friends hanging out. Pardon my candor here, but we aren't equipped for, that area is not equipped for it at all. It's a 2-lane road. I don't even feel safe biking on that, and I biked in Manhattan for a month last year, and I felt safer on those streets than I do on that neighborhood. So with that being said, I know this public hearing won't conclude tonight, but please, under no circumstance, allow this without building up the infrastructure. Get more lights out there, get more streets, widen them, do something to where the kids that are gonna live there, the teens, the college students, even the elderly, if someone decides to retire in one of those townhomes, they're safe. They're not going to have to worry about if they're gonna get hit or T-boned or something. It's not worth their safety just because we're trying to grow. Yes, we're going to grow. Dr. Tweedy, you're right. We're going to have another 10,000 people, if not more. We're growing exponentially. But at the cost of what? Overcrowded roads? Will our sewer system, will our water system handle it? Experts, I think, are saying yes, but at the same time, we allow one, we allow another, and then another. So why not stop altogether until we can actually say, we have that fixed? Because 200 units on a road that small, that's going to be a traffic nightmare. And that's just from someone on a bike. That's not even from someone on a car. With that, I thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
I'm trying to get them to come up too. My name's Albert Billingsley. I represent the Windsor Hills Neighborhood Association. Some of the members are here with me. But we are very concerned with what we see going on in this neighborhood, in our neighborhood. The apartments seem to be the builder's choice because it's quick and easy and you can get money out of it faster. I understand that. And that really kind of bothers me because it's so easy for them to do that. And I wonder why that is. Why is it so difficult for these builders to look at single-family homes or necessarily even single-family homes? What about an area that has single-level community that some of our older families would move into? There are several families that I know of in my neighborhood that they are at the point now in their lives where if there was a good community like that was available right now, they'd be moving into it. And the point that was brought up about the roads too is valid. This is a 2-lane road for the most part. It's a major intersection between Timberlake and Graves Mill Road. And on Home Depot on one end, Kroger on the other, that's heavily traveled. And for the most part, if you go through there, which I do quite often, you go through on a school day during this time when the buses are coming, when they're loading or dropping off, they're blocking the road. So there's backup. If you go in during trash day, the trash men are going down through there. They're doing their job, and I'm glad they are, but they're backing up the roads. And there are big semis that go in there and out. There's a place right off the right off. I don't know what it is, but there are semi-trucks going through there all the time. Piedmont is on the other side of it, but this is another business that has semis coming back and forth on a regular basis. It is a real problem for people who live there to get back and forth. What I would like to see, hopefully, is if the city continues to do this, you would expand the existing road to at least a 4-lane road going back and forth, because that would make traffic a whole lot easier, and make them, or maybe even 3, because there's 3 lanes from Kroger about a couple blocks up that at least alleviate some of that problem as far as turning and buses stopping. But it's a real concern for our neighborhood. Every time we have a meeting, it's always brought up. There's just so many apartments that are being built. I understand Liberty University. I know that they're here. I know that the students have got to go somewhere. I understand that. And I'm not asking for a moratorium on building at all. I know that. I'm a realist. Building's going to happen. But please, put some sense and thought behind some of this. Think of the neighborhoods that are there, the people that are already there, established neighborhoods. We have to deal with this on a daily basis, so please give us a consideration. Thank you.
Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
Hello, I'm Chris Mitchell, and I live in Windsor Hills, and I love Windsor Hills, but I'm beginning to not like it quite so much because of all the development. And I'm not opposed to development. It's just the apartments have overrun. There's far too many. I like single-family houses. That being said, when you have a single-family home that's rented in Cornerstone to 6 unrelated students, it creates 6 more vehicles. They create more traffic for us. And Old Graves Mill is a terrible road. I can't believe anybody would even consider riding a bike on it. Because I've been almost forced off the road when the big trucks come through. There is an industrial park there, and there are big semis that come in and out. When the mail's delivered, it backs up the traffic. Like Al said, the buses do. It's a hazard, and we don't need any more apartments. We just don't need them. And, progress is good, but you have to have limits on what you do and pick and choose what you choose to put there. And green space is also good, so I'd like some more of that. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak in opposition? Okay, in that instance, the public hearing will then continue at the December 13th meeting. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I do have some email correspondence that was submitted.
Well, Council, this is your pleasure. Would you like to hear the email correspondence now, or would you like to wait until December 13th?
I think we should hear it. She's got it now.
Would you like to hear it now? Consensus?
Thank you. This first email is from C. Gammon. It reads, Lynchburg does not need even more apartments. Lynchburg has an overabundance of apartment complexes, many of which units are Section 8. Rental units increase the amount of city services required, example, crime prevention, to be provided, and eventually increase the amount of taxes required from residents. Non-mixed-use rentals units devalue properties owned by city residents, increase taxes drive landowners to the surrounding counties, which further increases rental units in the city. City rental capacity is currently near and unbelievably 70% of city residents. If the city is bent on permitting more rental units, then begin issuing Section 8 building permits in the 03 zip code where there's abundant opportunity. The 03 zip code is perpetually overrepresented on city council, resulting in the remainder of the city suffering economic setbacks such as overbuilding of rental units and placement of habitat housing. Please cast a vote in opposition to this proposal for 169 apartments and 29 condos on Old Graves Mill Road at your November 1st meeting. Neighborhoods in 24502 are getting trampled on every new development. At some point, we have to pull back. That time is now. The next is from Michael Hall. It reads, please cast a vote in opposition to this proposal for 169 apartments and 29 condos on Old Graves Mill Road at your November 1st meeting. The 24502 area is disproportionately bearing the brunt of new housing projects in our city. Traffic on Timberlake is bad and getting worse. Graves Mill and Old Graves Mill are on similar path. The character of O2 neighborhoods are being dramatically changed for the worse with massive apartment complexes popping up next door. Meanwhile, O3 successfully blocks even modest, medium, and high-density housing projects. I'm not opposed to building more housing to keep rent low, but the burden should be more evenly distributed within the city. In my opinion, this is one of the top 2 or 3 issues facing our city, and how council members vote on these issues will have a large influence on my vote in this and future elections. I don't know if I mentioned this, but this is from Michael Hall. The next one was from Mr. Al Billingsley, who is actually able to be here today in person. And I can confirm that this is a summary of what he had said, so I will not be reading that one to the record. The next is from Jay Martin. It says, vote yes and support neighborhoods in 24502. Economic growth is good for everyone. Don't ever stop. Prosperity for all. And the last one I have is a form email, so I'll read it once and then submit all the names that sent the email. Please cast a vote in opposition to this proposal for 169 apartments and 29 condos on Old Grays Mill Road at your November 1st meeting. Neighborhoods in 24502 are getting trampled on with every new development. At some point, we have to pull back. That time is now. This is signed by Cassandra Taylor, Brian Zabrowski, Letitia Lowry, George Harton, Dennis Toothman, Loretta Dottie, John Ritchie, Kathy Jermoth, Keith Bellinge, Angela Collinger, and Lorraine did not give a last name. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The public hearing will continue at the December 13th meeting. Thanks to all of the neighbors who came out to speak this evening. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to move us along to the next item, folks, if that's all right. Okay. Consideration number 10, consideration of adopting an ordinance approving the petition to rezone 0.477 of an acre located at 2025 Lakeside Drive to allow the use of the existing building as a landscaping service office and on-site parking of commercial vehicles. Staff will provide a brief summary of the request. Ms. Fresheisen.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of council. Joel Sutton of Sutton Landscaping is petitioning to rezone, as you said, 0.477 of an acre at 2025 Lakeside Drive to allow the use of existing building as a landscape services office and on-site parking of commercial vehicles. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this rezoning petition at their meeting on October 12th.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone to make a presentation?
We're a frequent flyer tonight.
Yeah.
Amy Sipe with AccuPoint Surveying and Design, representing Mr. Sutton and Sutton Landscaping. Rachel gave a brief overview of the project. Before we go into some of it, though, we've talked a lot about sidewalks tonight. There was actually a follow-up drawing to this, and I don't know if you got that one, but we did go through the process of the formula, and no sidewalks are required for this one because of the redevelopment. So this is one that it actually works in the developer's favor. Mr. Sutton with Sutton Landscape, clearly the business is named after him, is seeking to revitalize this property into his business office. As you would suspect, most of his customers do not come to him. He is going to their homes, but periodically he does have clients that want to come and meet about design or pay their bill. So this would mostly be him, an administrative person, maybe an HR person of office staff of that kind. In the rear, and some of the reason for the B5 zoning is that he would have what I call similar to, I'm not preferencing Ford, but F-250 size trucks with an enclosed trailer that would be locked for security purposes. These are the trailers that his staff take to the homeowners, their residences or businesses where they're doing yard work, and they secure their blowers and weed eaters and mowers inside these trailers. So that is the pickup truck and trailer, and hence that was the reason for the equipment B5 zoning. So he would propose for those. As you can see, this is a very odd-shaped piece of property. It's almost in the shape of a pie that goes to the rear. There would be no storage of materials or any landscape fabrics or mulching or anything like that. There's just not physically room for it. They would be required to close one of the current entrances onto Lakeside Drive. At what time this property was built, there were 2 driveways for, I assume, aesthetic reasons and convenience. Now that it is zoned B1 and proposed to go to B5, it would go to meet the city's current commercial driveway ordinance. This is a shared driveway with the piece directly adjacent to it. Those homes that you see are currently being rented. They are a non-conforming existing use. This is a B1 zoning, but they are currently rented as rental property. It's just 2 tenants in each one of those. But the driveway, in the legal documents that talks about the cross-access, they would be allowed to maintain, he would provide them access to keep using that. It'd actually be a better driveway for them to come through to their properties because it would be larger, but he could not, I think there was some discussion about buffer at one time. We couldn't buffer that because they would need it. The second home that's towards the rear, we couldn't buffer that from them using the driveway. So happy to answer any questions about his business that I can, or the configuration of the improvements.
Thank you. We'll call you back up if need be. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor?
I feel I must reclaim the frequent flyer. But no, Timothy Santiago again, but when it comes to just a simple improvement, I know I've spoken in opposition of, well, everything tonight so far, but almost. I don't see a problem with this and why the council wouldn't approve just allowing the man in the company to fix up this little piece of property. Because, I mean, he's probably already going to move trucks in and out, so it possesses no real significance to let him change it. If anything, it allows us to bring a little bit more in real estate tax, because property value is going to go up some. So why not allow him, and why not let the city benefit? More space for him to park his stuff. Yes, it's a busy road. Big trucks are going to come in and out of Lakeside no matter what. So I don't see a reason for this council not to approve. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor? Anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Any emails or phone calls, Madam Clerk? There are none. Thank you. No rebuttal then is needed. The public hearing is closed. The matter rests with council. Discussion?
Quick question.
Yes, Councilmember Helgeson.
Thank you. Rachel, on the B5,
So we're going from a B1 to a B5, but it looks like with the proffer that all the B5 uses are nixed with the exception of parking, pickup truck and trailer. Am I reading that right?
That's correct.
So it's not really a B, it's still a B1.
It's a
and all
very
the
limited B5.
So it's all the uses under a B1 with the exception of, because to park trucks and trailers, you need a B5. So it's really constraining the B5. Am I reading that right?
It is, yes.
You were
Yes.
thinking about it for a second.
I'm just processing.
Okay, good, thank you.
May I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Wilder, or sorry, Councilmember Nelson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Feraldi. Councilmember Nelson, would you like to add additional comments?
It seems fairly evident that the uses to which this property would be applied if it was changed to B5, notwithstanding that a number of other things could be used with it, the fact that it is visually, from a satellite view, only a sliver of a piece of property. It's not going to, by adopting that zoning, it's not going to have any material impact on any of the adjoining property. And as I read it, I think the property, all of the property to the southwest of it is already B5. So it's not inconsistent with what is immediately adjoining. the southwestern portion of it. So I think whatever offensive qualities may arise from making the change, they would be nuances and not significant.
Councilmember Feraldi.
I'm just honored to join you on your last motion.
Thank you. I will go ahead and call for the vote then, unless there's additional discussion. No? Okay. And the motion passes 6-0. Good luck with the project. Thank you. We now move into the public comment portion of the agenda. During public comment, individual speakers have 3 minutes to speak, and those representing a group have 5 minutes to speak. Typically, City Council takes comments made during the public comment section of the agenda under advisement and may refer concerns to the city manager for follow-up. We will hear from a citizen regarding a matter, and that is Mr. Santiago. Please do.
Timothy Santiago, proud resident of Ward 2, Mr. Wilder. But Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, as I'm sure you've seen in the agenda, what I'm here to talk to you tonight about is Rule 6.9A, and that's your duty to vote. Now, I want to say not only that rule after seeing some things tonight, but when this council votes, it should only abstain if there's a reason under the Conflicts of Interest Act. It should not, under any circumstances, vote to abstain. And when you do, and it's erroneous, the rest of the council, it falls upon you to advise your fellow council member to not vote, to not abstain from the vote. But at the same time, tonight, with respect to this council, some of the back and forth that happened is beneath you. You are our elected leaders. We look to you for guidance in times of turmoil, and there are times of triumph. We always look to you to see what is going to happen in this city. We're a great city. While there are sometimes I gripe and moan about Lynchburg, I love it here. I tried moving, then I moved right back. Y'all couldn't get rid of me. But I must go back to the rules because they're there for decorum. They're there in order to maintain transparency and to maintain order. And to maintain those two things keeps the public's trust in this body. And in today's political climate, I honestly rarely find a city council that, while a lot of people might not like certain members of council, but yet I still find confidence. I still find that the public treats you with regard that is due to this body. So with all that being said, please remember what it is that you are here for, and that is to govern, and that is to set forth policy, to take away policy that has absolutely no bearing. As in Councilman Member Hegelson pointed out, the sidewalk, yeah, that needs to be amended. As other council members have pointed out in the past, and has been done so by this council, when things are messed up, you fix them. And when things don't need fixing, we don't fix them, or we table it indefinitely. But please maintain your decorum and your rules, because with that, you maintain your trust from the community. And with that being said, I thank you for your time, and that is it for this evening.
Thank you very much. And I believe that concludes our, Dr. Tweedy. No.
I have something I just want to say following public comments. I heard some things during public comments regarding infrastructure, regarding give and takes, and I just wonder how that parallels on one side of town with the conversation of Tyriana in another neighborhood. Infrastructure investment, schools are what I heard. And so I'd like city staff to go back and talk about all of the conversation that we've had tonight. That's just me. I'm asking all of the conversation we've had tonight to go back and talk about this development piece, one side of town versus the other, and we have another neighborhood plan that needs infrastructure investment in consideration of where we invest as a city to ease some growth and development or spur in other areas.
Thank you, Dr. Tweedy. Mr. Mr. Nelson, would you like the final word this evening?
It's been a pleasure working with all of you, with staff, engaging with the citizens and all of our businesses in the city. Not quite 13 years, but coming very close to 13 years on this council, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. With that, we are adjourned.